The Smithsonian Faculty Fellowship Program represents a rewarding academic professional development opportunity for faculty at Montgomery College. The fellowships are a product of a unique collaboration between Montgomery College and the Smithsonian Center for Learning and Digital Access. It's the first of its kind between the Smithsonian Institution and a community college.
Alejandro Leopardi received his BA in Communication Studies and his MA in English. Prior to teaching, he worked in various aspects of marketing for 7 years. After receiving his master's, he worked as a freelance editor and writer while also working as a substitute teacher for kindergarten through 12th graders in San Diego County and then Montgomery County. In 2012, he began teaching part-time at Howard Community College and Montgomery College, joining the full-time faculty in 2015. He was awarded the GHI Summer Research Grant, presented at several conferences, participated in the Honors Faculty Fellowship, participated in the part-time task force that created the part-time centers, and co-chaired the Student Excellence Awards in English and Reading at Germantown.
All right, so I did my project for my ENGL 101A class last semester, but I am actually using the Smithsonian again this semester. We're actually going this weekend to the American History Museum, so it's going to be kind of cool. It's a completely different project. But the theme for my class last semester was democracy, the foreign experience, and how we're all connected. And it was an overall theme for the entire semester. So I used the museum for one project, but overall the theme was democracy centered. Hopefully that works. So what I did was prepare students ahead of time. And it's a 101A class, it's an intro to college writing. The central focus for that class is not critical thinking, but I want to implement those ideas as they move into a 102 course. So I want to know what they know about democracy, which for the most part is not a whole lot, besides like freedom of speech and like the big ones, and what they understand about it. So we ask questions and we discuss stuff together. I go over the Bill of Rights, other aspects of democracy together as a class. And to ensure that everyone is clear or clearer on what democracy is, so that we're all on the same footing as we move forward. So what they didn't understand before, they understand now, and that's kind of the goal at the beginning, is to get them ready to think about this. It's going to carry on through the whole semester, all 5 different essays. So part of the theme of the semester is the foreign experience, so we talk about what that actually means. And it means a whole bunch of different stuff. So I asked them, what do you think it means? Now, some people were like, they mentioned that immigrants or people of different races or backgrounds or whatever. So we talk about what that means, how they're perceived, but also how they perceive the country, the U.S., and how they perceive democracy, and whether or not, how some of the other fellows also talked about, if it works or not. If it's something that's a work in progress, do they see any downfalls, anything that they could maybe work to improve. And I think Raquel talked about that activity earlier, and I'm pretty sure you guys already done this as part of your fellowship, which is the image selection activity, where I picked a bunch of images, except for I didn't do a democracy. I picked a bunch of random kind of cartoons from different newspapers, from the New York Times, Washington Post, that depicted some kind of immigrant-themed image to see what they would select and how they would talk about it. I got some weird responses, but overall it was a learning experience for all of us, and we got to talk about that. Mostly what I did that for is to understand their biases, and I let them know that we all have them. We have them, we have to know what they are, and we have to own them. I asked a simple question, like, what party do you fall in? Are you Democrat or are you Republican? And then I asked a question, simple question, why? No one actually had an answer. No one had a real answer as to why they fall for that Democrat or that political party. They just said, well, I don't know, my parents are. And that's a question we have to ask ourselves. Why do we believe the things that we believe? Because it's not just enough to know that you believe them, but why do you believe that? And that helps us prepare ourselves to see things differently, especially in museums where we're kind of attracted to certain exhibits over others, some artifacts over others. We need to know why we're doing that. Being more aware actually kind of pushes you to maybe not go for that artifact and move yourself somewhere else. Pick something different that isn't what you would normally pick. And so that's part of the preparing them to kind of get ready just to think about the museums. And then I hand out, which is essay number 2, which is what the museum visit is directly related to. For me, it's the comparison contrast essay. And I just kind of broke it down to what the assignment is and then the purpose. So we visited the National Portrait Gallery. That was the goal. During the visit, they have to find 2 portraits, and they must be completely different, which means if you pick one of a president, the other one has to be of someone who's not a president, in order to be able to really see differences and similarities. Using techniques that we studied in class, you're going to write a 3 to 4 page paper on that, on those 2 portraits. And you have to find at least 2 points of comparison, and to draw in that theme of democracy, the last point has to be about how it relates to democracy. What does it show about democracy? What does it not show? So that's part of the major assignment, and the purpose really is to see the foreign experience and to see how 2 different portraits, who seemingly on the surface look completely different, can have those similarities. And I extend that to real life, to everything that you notice in real life. 2 things that might be unlike or more alike than you think, you just have to see them differently. And that's kind of the goal of, for me, for critical thinking in the one-on-one aspect. Whoop, that didn't work. And it just freezes. Thanks, Brett. Perfect. So I do go, and I'm not going to go over it because it's already been discussed, but the object-based learning lecture, I go through that prior to the museum visit just to get them, again, it's all about preparing students to do what they're supposed to do at the museum. And then also have them sign up for the learning lab, which is an important part, especially for the portrait gallery, to try to find images ahead of time that they may be interested in and may want to look at in person. A lot of people, a lot of students actually looked at the President Obama online. But when I saw their faces, I saw them in person, it was a completely different reaction. They were just in awe and taken aback at how, first of all, how big that portrait is, and 2, the colors and how they kind of came at you. And students, there was a group of them, at least 8, were just standing there for like 10 minutes, just staring at it while some of the students kind of looked at the other ones. And it was kind of cool because we had already looked at it. We had already talked about it, so I thought they were going to look at it and move on, but they just stayed there. And it's a really interesting thing to see students kind of be attracted to this kind of, to the images or portraits specifically. And I had them look at different portraits online. I had them actually curate their own collections. So they all had their own collections. I had my own that I shared with them. And they had all this before we even left. So they're completely prepared to get to this museum and do what they were supposed to do. Other ways that I prepare them that are non-museum related is I show them clips of a documentary. It's actually a book written by Juan Gonzalez called Harvest of Empire. He's a journalist from Puerto Rico, but he's an American journalist because he does his journalism here. He wrote this book to try to show how the U.S. has kind of invested and injected itself into other nations in ways that we weren't previously aware of. But instead of having to read the book, because people don't want to read, I showed them the documentary because that's even better, right? And they the cool thing about the documentary is it actually breaks it down by countries. So it's Mexico, Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, Guatemala, Nicaragua. So it's cool. What I got to do is show them in bits. And part of that is not just show them the videos, but what I do is ask them about their ideas about immigration beforehand, before I even show them the clips. I just want to get a sense of what they know before, have them see the clips, and then their reactions afterwards. Did they learn anything? Were their minds swayed? It often doesn't happen, right? Not just with one video, but do they think differently about that country? And then did they learn something new, which is kind of the point, right? Did they learn something new they didn't know before that they could use in their own lives or they can use in their writing? And a lot of times they did. Brett, thank you. I also asked them about the legal system, the justice system, if they think it's fair, does it work for everyone, why do you think so? All these questions before I do anything. And then I show them, not just one episode, but a couple episodes of Adam Ruins Everything. It's a show on True TV. And what I like about the show, he's kind of comedic in the way that he expresses the topics. But the very interesting part is he actually puts up all his sources for everything that he states as fact. That I show them as, you can't just say things, you need to show where you got it from. It's an important lesson in just even this TV comedy show. It's an important lesson to learn, that you have to show your sources. And the same ideas, what did you think before? What do you think now? Did you even consider these ideas? And I show them that this is in fact compare, contrast. You're already thinking this way. You're comparing your previous thoughts to your new ones, seeing what's similar and what's dissimilar. And I could just give them this, we'll actually go back one more. So this is just what I tell them. You can have your ideas, but you must use source material to help support, or in some cases refute those ideas. This is how you grow, right? That's how you grow. And that's what 102 is all about, so I'm just trying to get them prepared for that. So now you can That's us at the beginning of when we all first got there. So I went with my wife and my kids, and then I had a student who also went with her kids. Most of them actually brought friends or partners, which was really interesting, and we all rode the metro down together. All those people plus some. It was really interesting. We took up almost an entire car. And then I took them, this is just one of the exhibits. It's the President's Hall. I took them to 3 different exhibits in the museum. All right, next one. These are just pictures of my students. That one, the Marlon Brando one, was actually a really interesting poster. We had a long discussion about what they saw, what they think that poster meant, what it means to us, and how does it show what American society was in that time, which was in the 50s. All right, so in addition to the actual paper, they also had a different assignment on the site. So this is also how I motivated them to go. So in addition to the 2 portraits they had to pick for their major assignment, they also had to pick a 3rd portrait, and they had to analyze it. So these are just some of the questions I asked. What do you like about the portrait? What makes it stand out to you? Why is it in the exhibit you found it in? How does it fit in with the other portraits in that particular exhibit? And are there signs of democracy in the portrait? That's an interesting question because the first exhibit we go to, we see Yarrow, who was a black Muslim man living in the U.S. at a time where we didn't think Muslims existed. We know now they do. But I went into a whole spiel, which actually was told to us during our visit to the museum. It captivated everyone. Afterwards, I had questions from people who weren't in my class, asking me questions about the portrait. I don't know. So I answered what I could. But it's interesting because when they saw that and they looked around that room and all the other portraits, it stood out and it was purposeful. But these questions mattered and it made them think a little bit more. So I'm going to talk about this in a second, but during the actual museum visit, what I did was actually did some research beforehand. So when I went to these exhibits, I pointed to certain artifacts and certain portraits, and I gave them a background of it. And then we had a discussion about it, and then I let them roam around. And I found this, I think, more important for them because they got a little bit of background. They didn't just see the portraits. I gave them some background. They knew what they were looking at. And then they had chances to ask questions, which in class, most of them never even asked questions. I think this got them more open, and it made class actually more fun because they were more open to asking me questions. They could see that I was a real person. My wife and kids were there. And I think that it also helps students. So this is a really cool experience for me. When we come back to class that Monday, because I took them on a Sunday, and we had a post-visit discussion in class, I also asked students to come up with their phones and show images that we didn't even look at during the actual tour. And they showed them some really cool portraits, and we talked about those, and they took pictures of the information. And it wasn't even part of any of the assignments. They just thought these were interesting portraits. Then students conducted, because of what I had them do, deep analysis of the portraits and their connection to democracy. So they looked at different ways of looking at these portraits. It wasn't just, here's an image of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., but it was Russell Means, it was Marin. There was a whole bunch of different portraits that people selected I thought was really interesting. And I gave you a list of some of the stuff. I mean, some of the ones are kind of easy, Bill Clinton, but we had Frida Kahlo, we had John Kennedy, James Farmer, Christopher Reeve was a cool one. Russell Means was a really nice one that I didn't expect. So this is just a list of some of them. Get to the next one. Then I just picked some random quotes that I thought were indicative of what I think the museum visit does. It's special to me because it made me a more open-minded person about museums. That's an interesting one. Visiting a museum was pretty fun. Before going to the museum, I never understood art. But going there informed me more about the meaning behind it. That was, I think, changing for them. I like the third one. I normally get bored and distracted in museums, but in this one, my attention was kept on all the art and different portraits. It also helped me keep my attention when Professor Leopardi would speak on the certain portraits in the background. I learned a lot, and especially how to appreciate art in a more meaningful way. that, I think, is one of those impactful ways that the museum changes people. I think the last one's also one that I thought was funny. I'm not a fan of museums, but this gallery actually caught my attention. The stories behind those portraits were what most interested me. And what I thought was the most interesting part for me is that I stayed after because my wife and kids had gone off because they were hungry or whatever. And I stayed with my class. Afterwards, I stayed with my wife because she wanted a tour, so I gave her the same tour. We left 2 hours later. When I got to the metro, half the class was still there. They were just getting on the metro with me, which was really interesting. I thought they were just going to jet. Like, I'm done with this. I already picked my portraits. I'm going to go home. But they all stayed. And they stayed and walked around. They actually went to a couple museums. They walked around Chinatown. So I think, in general, this is a really fun, interesting, and motivational way to get students to do what you want them to do and think in a different way. So I'd like to thank Sarah, Mimi, and Denise for allowing me to do this. Again, I'm taking my students this semester. It's really fun. You're going to have a really good time. Thank you.